I'm Victoria, and I never thought my life would come to this. Standing in my quiet kitchen, the weight of a secret so heavy it could crush me. 22 years of marriage to Mark, a man whose steady hands built our world, now feels like a fragile house of cards, trembling under the shadow of a choice I made in desperation. Debt clawed at us, a relentless beast, and in a moment of sheer panic, I crossed a line I can't uncross. Now, as I stare at the empty chair where he should be, my heart races with a single, haunting question. Will the truth I'm hiding destroy everything we've fought for? Picture this: a quiet evening, the kind where the world seems to hush itself just for you, and I'm standing at my kitchen window, watching the last sliver of sun dip below the horizon. There's a glass of red wine in my hand, half empty, or maybe half full, depending on how you look at it. I'm Victoria, by the way, and I've got a story to share. One that's been simmering inside me for far too long. I'm 48 now, and the years have etched their lines into my skin, each one a silent witness to the life I've lived. My voice might carry a warmth, a softness, but beneath it, there's a weariness I can't quite shake. Life has a way of wearing you down, doesn't it? But it also builds you up in ways you never expect. I've been married to Mark for 22 years. That's over 2 decades of shared mornings, whispered secrets, and the kind of quiet routines that become the backbone of a life together. He's a steady man, Mark is. Tall, with hands that are rough from years of hard work, and eyes that still crinkle at the corners when he smiles at me across the dinner table. We've built something solid, or at least I thought we had. There are moments, though, when I catch myself wondering if solid is just another word for stuck. Don't get me wrong, I love him. I do. But love isn't always a straight line. It bends, it twists, and sometimes it pulls you in directions you never saw coming. I remember the early days, the way we'd steal moments in the dark, our breaths mingling in a dance of promises and dreams we thought would last forever. But life has a way of throwing curveballs, doesn't it? About 6 months ago, everything started to unravel. I can still see Mark sitting across from me at our cramped kitchen table, his face pale under the flickering fluorescent light. He'd just come back from meeting with a lender, a shady one, the kind you don't find in any phone book. He'd taken out a loan for $8,000 to cover emergency car repairs and some overdue medical bills after I'd had a minor surgery. I remember the desperation in his eyes as he signed those papers, his voice low and strained as he promised me he'd handle the repayments with overtime at work. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But there was a knot in my stomach that wouldn't loosen. Night after night, we'd sit at that same table, calculators and crumpled bills spread out like a battlefield. The numbers never added up, no matter how many times we ran them. We'd argue over every penny, our voices rising until the silence that followed felt heavier than the words. Then the overtime dried up at his job, and that $8,000 loan ballooned into a monstrous $12,000 with interest and penalties piling on like a storm we couldn't outrun. I started to notice the changes in Mark, how he'd leave for work before the sun was up, how he'd come home long after dark, avoiding my gaze. I'd ask questions, but his answers were short, clipped, like he was hiding something bigger than just the debt. The tension in our home became a living thing, thick and suffocating. We barely looked at each other anymore. I'd catch myself staring out that kitchen window more often than not, lost in thoughts I couldn't voice, when the world outside seemed to hold answers I couldn't grasp. That quiet evening I mentioned earlier? It shattered in a way I never saw coming. I was still holding that glass of wine, the crimson liquid catching the dim light, when a loud, insistent knock rattled the front door. My heart skipped a beat, a cold dread creeping up my spine. Mark wasn't home yet. He'd left hours ago, mumbling something about a late shift. I set the glass down, my hands trembling just a little, and made my way to the door, each step heavier than the last. When I opened it, 2 men stood there, their presence filling the doorway like a storm cloud. One was stocky, with a buzz cut, and a jagged scar slicing across his cheek, his eyes hard and unyielding. The other was leaner, with slicked back hair and a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. They introduced themselves as Tony and Ray, debt collectors in their late 30s, sent to settle a score. Tony, the stocky one, had a voice like gravel, rough and unapologetic, as he demanded immediate payment of the full $12,000. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stood there, frozen, my mind racing back to those nights at the kitchen table, to Mark's evasive glances, to the weight of a debt I thought we were still fighting together. Ray stepped forward, his smirk widening as he leaned against the doorframe, his gaze raking over me in a way that made my skin crawl. He didn't say much at first, just let Tony do the talking, but his silence was louder than any threat. Tony's scarred face twisted with impatience as he repeated the demand, his meaty hand slamming against the doorframe for emphasis, making me flinch. I tried to explain, my voice shaking, that I didn't have that kind of money, that Mark wasn't even here to discuss it, but Tony cut me off, his tone dripping with menace. He said they didn't care who paid, as long as someone did, and they weren't. It's late afternoon on Monday, and I'm alone in the house again, standing at the kitchen counter with a sponge in my hand, scrubbing like my life depends on it. The surface is already spotless, but I can't stop. It's as if I can wipe away the mess I've made, erase the choices that have left me hollow. The air still carries a faint whiff of cheap cologne, a lingering ghost of a moment I can't undo. It clings to everything, a reminder of the line I crossed. Every creak of the old house sends a jolt through me, my nerves raw and frayed. I keep glancing at the door, half expecting Mark to barge in early, his eyes searching mine for answers I'm not ready to give. My mind is a battlefield, torn between guilt and a bitter kind of reasoning. I betrayed him, my husband, the man who stood by me through every storm. The weight of that betrayal sits heavy on my chest, crushing me with every breath. But then there's the other voice, the one that whispers I had no choice, that I did what I had to do to pull us out of the quicksand of debt. I tell myself it was for us, to save our home, our life together, but the words feel like ash in my mouth. How do you justify something that tears at the very core of who you are? I drop the sponge and pick up the phone, my fingers trembling as I dial the lender's office. I need to know it wasn't for nothing. The clerk on the other end sounds bored, her voice flat as she confirms the adjustment. $6,000 cleared from the balance, just like that. I mumble a thank you and hang up, but there's no relief, no lightness. Instead, a deeper pit forms in my stomach, a gnawing emptiness that no amount of scrubbing can clean. What have I done? How do I look Mark in the eye knowing the cost of this so-called solution? I move to the stove, preparing dinner like a robot, my hands unsteady as I chop carrots and onions. The knife slips once, nearly catching my finger, and I curse under it's early evening now, and the kitchen feels like a cage, lit only by a single overhead bulb that casts long, harsh shadows across the room. The smell of half-cooked dinner, burnt onions and overdone chicken, hangs heavy in the air, a bitter reminder of the normalcy I was trying to cling to just hours ago. Mark stands across from me, his broad frame rigid, holding that crumpled note in his hand like it's a weapon. His voice is low, sharp as a blade, cutting through the silence as he asks, "What kind of agreement did you make, Victoria?" Each word drips with suspicion, and I feel my throat tighten, like a noose pulling taut. My mind scrambles for an excuse, a lie, anything to shield him from the truth, but the weight of my guilt is a stone in my chest, too heavy to lift. I can't run from this anymore. The tears come before I can stop them, hot and relentless, streaming down my face as I collapse under the pressure. My voice breaks as I confess it all, the words spilling out in a desperate rush. I tell him about the day Tony and Ray came, their threats echoing in our doorway, how I felt cornered with no way out. I admit that I offered myself up, a bargain struck in a moment of sheer panic, to clear half of that suffocating debt. $6,000 wiped away in exchange for something I can never take back. I choke on the memory of those hours while he was at work, the shame of what I allowed to happen, the way I traded a piece of myself to keep a roof over our heads. I can barely look at him as I speak, my hands trembling, my breath hitching with every painful syllable. I watch his reaction unfold in agonizing slow motion. His face drains of color, going pale as a ghost, his jaw tightening until I can see the muscles twitch. His hands clench into fists, the note crumpling further in his grip, the paper almost disappearing into his palm. I brace myself for shouting, for anger to explode like a storm, but it doesn't come. Instead, there's a chilling silence. It's Tuesday morning now, and I'm sitting at the kitchen table, the same one that's held so many of our battles and quiet moments over the years. Mark's chair sits empty across from me, a void that feels wider than an ocean. He didn't come home last night. After that suffocating silence following my confession, he just turned and walked out, the door slamming behind him like a final judgment. I stayed up all night, pacing, waiting for the sound of his key in the lock, but it never came. I called his phone over and over, each unanswered ring echoing in my ears like a heartbeat fading away. Finally, around midnight, a single text came through, cold and distant. Staying at a friend's. Need to think. That was it. No anger, no questions, just those few words that cut deeper than any shouting match ever could. The house is silent now, unnaturally so, like it's holding its breath alongside me. It feels like a tomb, every corner heavy with memories of what I've shattered. The fridge hums faintly, but even that sound seems muted, swallowed by the weight of my regret. I look around, and all I see are reminders of the life we built. The chipped mug he always used for his morning coffee. The scuff marks on the floor from when we danced in our socks late one night. Now, those same spaces mock me, whispering of a trust I may have broken beyond repair. My eyes keep drifting to that empty chair, imagining him there, his rough hands folded, his gaze steady and searching. But he's not here, and I'm left with nothing but the echo of my own choices. I keep asking myself if it was worth it. Did protecting our finances, keeping a roof over our heads, justify the cost of my integrity? Did it justify the pain I saw in his eyes before he walked away? I thought I was saving us, but now I wonder if I've lost everything that mattered in the process. I don't know if Mark will ever forgive me for what I did, for the desperate bargain I made in a moment of fear. Worse, I don't know if I can forgive myself. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.